Lawyers, what law isn't real but people still insist that it exists? Viewer edition. Story 1. I never really thought that will readings were a law. I just thought they were something people organized and invited those in the will over for so that it could all be handled at once. It would be super interesting if everyone in the will was legally obligated to show up for a reading. Edit. My dad and I just spent an hour discussing the concept of a movie where if you're invited to the reading of a will, you have no choice but to attend. Cut to a story where 13 people are invited to a mansion a la Clue and told that each one will get a set number of shares in the will, but unless a good faith negotiation of the trading of those shares takes place at least once, no one will get anything. The shares say things like Lee's used tires and high-quality farming land, and these 13 eccentrics are fighting viciously for it, all refusing to give ground out of greed and refusing to give up their predetermined shares while also trying to pressure other people to trade their shares. The whole story is told by the ghost of the guy whose will was read, and he's telling the story a bit like the narrator to Rudolph does. He's deeply amused. The movie will be called Willpower. I 100% support this movie being made. I request that I get to play a character in it, not a big major character, maybe just like the butler who shows up every now and again, and I sure would love to get killed off by one of the main characters, or who knows, it's part of the mystery. Is there a mystery? Look, I just want to get killed in a movie. Come on. Story 2. There is a thing that cops did to me that is actually legal in my state, but totally effed up. When I mentioned it to another cop, he did apologize to me for it. To not make this excessively long, let's just say I had severe psychiatric issues when I was about 17 with no other prior offenses or the like. Hell, I was in the top 1% of my class. It was at that time I was also diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, now called autism spectrum disorder, part of which is an inability to intuit how others feel the way most people do and take for granted. After having a series of, let's call them charged events with no actual threats or the like said, I found the police knocking on my door one day to arrest me. So I asked them why they were arresting me. The officer sneered and angrily said, "You know why." Confused, I looked at him and said, "No, I don't. Why are you arresting me?" And he still refused to answer me. I had no idea what my charges were until I was brought to the courthouse. I am sorry that you had to go through that, and I hate when we see videos of police who are refusing to give very basic, reasonable information to people that they are dealing with and or trying to arrest. It just gets my blood boiling. Story 3. Fun fact, sovereign citizens claim that it's part of U.S. law, and it was. It was part of the Articles of Confederation, the document the U.S. functioned under until they were replaced by the Constitution in 1787, at the conclusion of the Philadelphia Convention. The convention was told to draw up amendments to the Articles, but decided partway through that there was so much wrong with the Articles of Confederation that it would be easier and better to start from the ground up. The Constitution then was designed to replace the Articles. This being the case, and since the Constitution didn't touch on the issue of sovereign citizens do not exist and haven't for over 200 years. The Articles of Confederation haven't been the laws of the land since the ratification of the Constitution by the states officially in 1789 with the election of good old George as president. Story 4. I worked for a job and there was a legal notice given out to people about the whole hearsay thing. It caused a bunch of backlash because it came down to, unless it's on video, it's just hearsay and they won't fire someone for it. We sort of jokingly asked, so if this guy murders someone in front of the rest of the team and we all see it but none of us catch it on video, it's just hearsay? We were told by our HR team, yep. Still makes me laugh how wrong some people get these things. Story 5. Elaborating on the undercover cop one, while undercover, cops are allowed to commit minor crimes in order to maintain their cover. They can never kill a person in cold blood. That is why you hear stories about criminal gangs ordering their members to kill someone to get promoted. Story 6. In Spain, if you're the accused, you're allowed to tell all the lies you want. Hell, you're going to get thrown in jail if the judge says you're guilty. It probably won't help you, but you're allowed.
I know it
couldn't possibly be presented this way. But here in America, there's, I don't even know how exact this custom is, but in courts, people have to place a hand on a Bible or some law book or whatever. And it's like, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And the person has to be like, yes, I do, whatever, I'm now imagining this scenario playing out in Spain where they're like, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And the person on the stand goes, no. And the judge is like, yeah, makes sense.
Story 7. Being one who works as a front desk receptionist for a small law office composed of 3 different smaller law firms that all kind of do their own thing, but I often help all 3 out and not just the main one, I've gotten the chance to hear a lot of stuff involving misconceptions when it comes to the law. The most recent one was the reading of the will, which I didn't even know about and didn't even realize that was a thing, lol. But as I'm often the notary/witness with signings, I get to hear how things work. Very helpful in the future, even if/when I get a different job. I quite enjoyed this video. Story 8. One thing that drove me crazy was possession is 9/10 of the law. Usually this was argued by classmates at lunch or recess when disputing whether someone would get in trouble for defacing something. I still occasionally hear it sometimes. To this day, I have no idea what that expression even means. Story 9. Years and years ago, a man my father worked with got entrapped by being an in-between drug mule for one undercover cop to another undercover cop. He had never done anything like it before. He got approached by the cop to deliver stuff to another cop. Story 10. One thing I learned about the overhead light not being illegal, if you get into an accident and claim that the overhead light distracted you, you could be charged with distracted driving. It certainly distracts me and messes with my eye adjustment, so in that case, it is technically illegal. Story 11. Not a lawyer, but I've worked in healthcare in various positions. A lot of people have no clue what HIPAA is. Had a patient once come in and say that it was a HIPAA violation to ask if they had been vaccinated. HIPAA doesn't have any rules that prevents a healthcare practitioner from asking questions about health history. And frankly, if you want to be sure that you get proper healthcare, you're going to want to be as clear as possible about your health history so your practitioner is better informed and can make better diagnostic and treatment choices.
Yeah, HIPAA stuff. I had training in a medical field back when I was a certified nursing assistant. And yeah, it's kind of amazing how much people misunderstand something that's, for the most part, pretty straightforward. But you know what? You give people a kind of basic rule and they're going to screw it up.
Story 12. Interestingly, in Brazil, while there isn't a specific right to a phone call, it is illegal to prevent someone from having outside communication altogether. This is especially important here because during the military dictatorship, police would use secret arrests without communication, and many people, especially political prisoners, were disappeared by the government. Many were tortured, all most likely killed. To this day, there are people whose families don't know what happened to them. So this right to communication goes beyond just a lawyer, very much extending to a right to have your family and loved ones know not only that you've been arrested, but on what grounds and where you're being held. Story 13. As for entrapment, I think there might be cause for expanding what we consider entrapment. Many lawyers have problems with the way cops catch people who solicit minors because the stings toe that line very closely. We want to catch people who target children, but if you're already dancing on the line, it's too easy to slip over and cross it, allowing the creep to walk. Story 14. As far as the asking when the radar gun was last calibrated defense for speeding, some judges take into account officer experience. If a veteran officer sees you are speeding, they can use that as their judgment for the ticket instead of using a radar gun at all. Seeing someone go 70 instead of 60 can be noticeable if you've seen it enough. Story 15. That driveway one happened to me one time. Someone parked their car in the entryway to my apartment building's parking lot and none of us could get out. We called the police, but he said that since it wasn't parked on the street, he wouldn't be able to tow it and just left. One of the tenants threw dog crap on the car's windshield. Eventually, we got another tenant to move the car next to it so we could all squeeze around the side. Story 16. The other thing is that little sticker on businesses that say something like this business uses video surveillance or something similar along those lines is a little thing called implied consent. Basically meaning that by entering a building you know uses cameras, you are giving them permission to film you for the purpose of those cameras being a deterrent/preventing crime. Not say if you just decided to strip naked and run around. If they did hand that over to anyone who just asked or posted it on social media, then that's actually a crime. If a business is then asked about a customer at X time, say to establish someone was where they said they were, for one example, and chooses to comply with an investigation without the need for all that paperwork that would demand they comply, it can in fact be used as evidence. I don't know why, but some people seem to think that you have to have a warrant or it's not valid in court. Of course, that doesn't mean that a company will help, as time is money, and they aren't obligated just because someone asks nicely. At least here, I can't speak for other places.
I mean, yeah, that honestly makes sense, though I'm sure that there are plenty of people who would try and argue against that and get it changed and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know. In this day and age, I just assume I'm always being videotaped when I'm out in public because it just feels like the direction everything's going in, and just get used to it.
Story 17. I'm on the second one, the one about recording in public, so pardon me if it was brought up later, but it gets me when people say, "You can't record me, that's against my HIPAA rights." HIPAA is only saying that your doctor and anyone that works for your doctor or any healthcare professional that legally had access to your health chart cannot share any information on you with anyone unauthorized. HIPAA does not mean you're entitled to privacy everywhere, and John at the store that's recording you have a Karen tantrum cannot violate your HIPAA rights. Story 18. Actually, the law about being recorded in a public space depends on the country. I don't know the exact details and such, and could be wrong, but a few years back here in the Netherlands, it became illegal to film someone without their consent. Although maybe it just applies to putting the material online. Story 19. It's illegal to have people's car registrations visible in photos of the car or just of a street. People on Berry Boys used to try to argue this all the time in legalese, even though they were semi-literate at best. They also threatened to report the website owners to all sorts of organizations, like Trading Standards, who prevent consumers being scammed, or accused him of violating all sorts of laws, like the Official Secrets Act, because a picture of a car in a car park reveals so much about the UK military. Story 20. France. Many people here think that if they have a knife with a blade shorter than the width of their hand, it won't be considered a weapon. There is no such law, but unless you are in a sensitive area, you usually can walk with a small knife without a permit. In any case, someone with authority can refuse access if you have a knife, whatever the size. Usually, if you are found with one, the police will ask why you have it. If you say it's a tool, you'll be fine, but if you say it's for defense, it makes said knife into a weapon, therefore it's illegal to carry. Also in law, there's a very important difference between carry and transport. If I transport my medieval gear, sword, spear, to a reenactment or because I'm moving, I'm in the clear. If I'm carrying it, therefore ready to use it, it's illegal. Same for airsoft replicas. If you want to transport them, say to the club, have them unloaded, and even better, have them partially disassembled and scattered in several bags. You cannot be considered ready to use them if they are in pieces.
Sir, is that a weapon that you have? What, this? No. This is a tool. I use it for cooking. Sir, that appears to be a pistol. Yes, it's my chef's pistol. I use it for cooking.
Story 21. Under U.S. Federal Code, an LEO cannot knowingly take illicit substances unless they are in imminent fear of danger/death. As soon as they are done, they should check into a local ER and report the use. Otherwise, you'll be lucky if you don't get hammer kicked off the force if you magically develop an addiction. Story 22. No business can tell you you cannot take a picture of the schedule as long as it has your name on the page you're photographing. The schedule should not be shared with random people, but they cannot use this as an excuse to prevent you from taking a photo of it. 45 out of 50 states have high state courts rule on this, and the other 5, it's never come up. Basically, if you're taking a picture of the schedule with your name on it, you cannot be prevented from doing so. Story 23. In the US, it's true there is no law that you have to wear shoes to drive a car, but many states have laws saying you have to wear shoes to drive a motorcycle. Also, while it's not illegal in many states, if an officer believes that your lack of shoes contributed to an accident, they can cite you for failure to exercise due care while operating a motor vehicle.
See, the thing I was always told why you need to wear shoes when you're driving is because if you get into an accident, then your bare foot is going up against textured pedals and metal and stuff, and it'll... Ugh. I just have nightmares about what it could do to a person's feet, but maybe not, but I don't know. It does kind of make sense. Like, if you're taking your shoes off, they could get stuck under a pedal or something. I don't know. I feel like you can get away with stuff if you're just, smart about it and don't do bad driving.
Story 24. Adding this one because I've seen companies/stores try to do this. There is no law saying that your service dog has to be on a leash or have a vest on in the US. There is also no law stating that they must be registered or have certification. While some cities may require all dogs, including pets, to be registered, national registries do not exist. Story 25. The haunted house thing with the will reminds me of a hilarious Scooby-Doo episode where this old dude fakes his death so that his will can be read, and they have to stay in this haunted house overnight before they can find his treasure. Turns out the monster was, in fact, the owner of the house and the writer of the will, and he was testing the gang to see if they were brave enough to get the prize. They weren't, laughed my friggin' butt off. Story 26. The light on in the car. I don't know how many places this is the same, but where I live, it actually is illegal to drive at night with the light on. It's a form of distracted driving because you don't need that light on to drive. Same fine as using a cell phone or eating while driving. Technically, you can get a distracted driving ticket here for talking to passengers in your vehicle if it's affecting the way you drive. Story 27. 2 possible reasons about the driving barefoot. 1, it's an old law and probably had more meaning back in the day that we just don't understand now. Cars are a lot easier to drive. Another, which I truly believe, is where would most people put their shoes? Assuming they were wearing them when they got in the car. It's likely they would be right there at their feet and could get caught under the pedals. I bet many people don't think about this. If you're just driving barefoot, I don't see much problem with that. Story 28. This is a really common one. You can't film me without my permission. Absolutely false. It is not illegal in any U.S. state, U.S. territory, or most developed countries like Canada or the U.K. to film someone without their permission, except in certain specific cases, such as photographing someone nude without their consent.
Oh, goodness gracious. Can you imagine in the United States if you weren't allowed to film people without their permission? There's just a whole sect of YouTube and TikTok videos that could no longer possibly exist of people just getting into arguments with each other and immediately just being, keep talking.
Story 29. To my knowledge, it is the law that the person behind is at fault if you get rear-ended in Texas. However, in my experience, cops recognize that the intent of the law matters as well, and if the person in front of you was 1, not moving, 2, in the middle of a 2-lane country road, 3, their brake lights weren't on, and 4, the only way to see their brake lights was to turn onto the road behind them, you don't get a ticket. Story 30. There are a few states in the U.S. that have more robust Good Samaritan laws that go one step beyond simply protecting the Good Samaritan from legal repercussions. Basically, the first people to arrive at the scene of an accident are obligated to stop and render whatever assistance they can. If you drive off, you can be arrested. I think these are all New England states, but could be wrong about that. Funny that I've only ever heard of these laws involving vehicular accidents and not any other incident involving injury. Also, this is no law in America, but mentioning to a jury that eyewitness testimony is proven to be horribly inaccurate is often enough for an automatic mistrial and censure of the lawyer who mentions it. The same goes for some courts with jury nullification. The mere mention of it has drawn a mistrial and the lawyer censured. Story 31. If a biological father is in the presence of their child and their child says that they are cold, the father has a legal obligation to respond, "Hi, cold, I'm dad." It's the only form of enforced speech in the U.S. Story 32. At 16 minutes, where the poster states that he was forced to rear-end a motorcycle, I have a few questions if anyone is still reading this. Why would the motorcyclist choose to put themselves at risk of loss of life or limb, cause their motorcycle damage deliberately, and put themselves at risk of being cited with reckless driving or potentially insurance fraud if they attempted to make a claim against your insurance company? That's where the question begins. If this were an attempt at fraud, why did they only request that you sign a written affidavit stating the facts of the incident rather than demanding the collection of your insurance information after contacting the police and taking a trip to the emergency room and having their vehicle towed? This is by far the most common action taken by people who cause accidents on purpose with the intent of defrauding the other motorist or their insurance company, since not calling police or requesting or seeking medical care is often seen by a judge or jury as their own negligence and can be used as an affirmative defense against any civil liability you have if you were uninsured at the time. Lastly, in my over 10 years of experience, I've never seen a single incident of a judge ruling in favor of the vehicle that struck another vehicle in the rear, since this is 100% avoidable by following basic traffic laws like traveling at a safe distance. The last fair chance doctrine also dictates that if there is a scenario where an accident is about to happen and a vehicle doesn't take reasonable action to avoid the collision when they should have reasonably known a collision were about to occur, they are generally held liable for any of the damages that happen next.
Oh, this person has said the thing that does get me about like the whole rear-ending thing. Like, people are like, well, what if someone just slams on their brakes and makes me rear-end them and everything, what about that? And they use the phrase traveling at a safe distance because, oh my God, drivers just don't do that. How often do you see people just so close to each other no matter what speed you're going? The rule of thumb I was taught when I was learning how to drive was that you should be 1 second behind a person for every 10 miles per hour that you're going. So if you're going 30 miles per hour, you should pass a sign 3 seconds after the car in front of you. If you're going 60 down a highway, it should be 6 seconds, which is a lot. It should be a lot of space. And I know it's not always doable, obviously, bumper to bumper, traffic, stuff like that, traffic jams, that happens. But for the most part, no matter where you are, people do not travel at a safe distance from one another, and it drives me bonkers.
Story 33. Here in Germany, it is warranty by law. You have something similar here called Gewährleistung. This is similar to a limited warranty, the nearest thing I can describe it in English because there's no word for it. It says by law that the product has to be working at the time of purchase, and any product defect that's the fault of the manufacturer in 2 years after buying has to be repaired or the item exchanged. After 3 times the same defect/error, you can bring the item back and get your money back. Story 34. There are a lot of people in the country that think that you must speed on the highway if the other traffic on the highway is speeding, or you will be pulled over for impeding the flow of traffic. This is false. The posted speed limit isn't the lowest recommended speed, it is the highest speed. Some areas will all 5 to 10 over, but I've been places that will pull you over for 3 over the speed limit. Story 35. In my country, there's a kind of reverse law to the Good Samaritan examples. You could be charged if you don't help someone who seems to be having a medical emergency. The minimum you're supposed to do is call an ambulance. Story 36. In Germany, you actually have the right to your own image, so nobody can take a picture or video of you without your consent, even in public. If somebody films around you and you are in a crowd and no face is the center/target in the video, that's okay. But if the focus is on you without your consent, it's illegal. This changes for people of public interest, like celebrities and politicians. They can be recorded in public without their consent. Story 37. Illegal switchblades. In 1958, the federal government outlawed them in interstate commerce, Indian reservations, military bases, and the U.S. Post Office. Then, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island outlawed them, but most states never passed any laws against them. It was always assumed. Most states simply outlawed any device brandished in a threatening manner, the item left to the arresting officer's discretion. But a switchblade in your house was not necessarily illegal. Newspapers and TV radio simply spread a lie that they were outlawed everywhere under all circumstances. Story 38. For number 3, in the US, you can actually be charged with manslaughter or something, or harassment, if you try to help someone who didn't ask you to. Like doing a car on someone without their consent, or doing a car on someone and then they die anyway. I don't think anyone has been charged with that, but you can be.
I feel like there's more to this one that's being left out, or, this almost feels like the, version that people believe but isn't necessarily true. Like, if someone is passed out and clearly needs CPR and you give CPR and, like, break a rib and they survive and they're like, you broke my rib, I'm going to sue you. Like, I feel like common sense has to come in place somewhere in that, doesn't it? Like, I mean, maybe not. It doesn't always seem to be the case with the law, but I gotta believe it does.
Story 39. I would like to note that while it isn't illegal to unionize and a company can't fire you for doing so, they can fire you for doing several of the tactics that unionizing often requires. Things like going on strike is the same thing as not showing up to work. You're just attempting to exercise your power in the relationship, work not getting done, or get what you want. Unions have their own set of issues, union dues, overreach of power, even much less flexible hours in some cases, and populist ideals are popular right now, but please be aware of what the union you're attempting to join is asking of the employer. And if you're concerned about a part of what they're asking for, like control of scheduling to ensure employees aren't being asked to work under specific circumstances or whatever, bring it up with the union leaders and maybe even don't join that union. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.